In today's video, we're going to be releasing our March outlook for March of 2024, diving into the temperature patterns as well as the precipitation patterns expected over the next month. Now, as we dive into our monthly outlook, this is actually a different model than we usually use. We're using the CANSIPS, and the reason we're using this model is I think it has a pretty interesting outlook here. We're going to dive into this one. We will be looking at the GFS ensemble model, which is much more reliable in a minute. This one has about the opposite of what we're expecting for the month of March, and also cooler air across the areas that we expect, overall warmer temperatures, so exact opposite. And I wanted to show you guys this just to dive into the differences that we see when we're looking at these models in the long range for monthly outlooks. We can see something like this and see quite the opposite on different models, so it's really important to use current data, past couple of weeks, and also historical data in order to come up with an accurate forecast in the long range. Now let's take a look at that model that we actually want to look at today. Usually when it's a 1 month outlook, it's better to just look at, the 5-day, or even in this case, the daily temperature anomalies, just to get a grip of what we're expecting overall day to day during the month of March. And we do have a cool down in the east right now and a warm up out west, but as you can see, it trends really far eastward quickly. And this is by March 3rd. We have really cold temperatures out west. And what you're not seeing here is that there's also storms bombarding this area like they've been doing recently. So lots of snowfall, lots of cold, and we have this surging warmth across the central and the eastern states. This looks very much so the opposite of what we just saw on that seasonal model, doesn't it? And that is due in part to really just the differences in the way these models work. So this is what we're using and going along with, and we see this warmth really lasting long in the east and the cold out west, and this is all the way by the midpoint of March. We're still seeing the warmth in the east and the central states here, and then the cold out west really taking hold and gripping that trough, and it's lasting very long. So definitely this is the pattern that we expect to persist at least through the midpoint of the month, maybe even longer, and that should make this nearly the average for the month once we're looking back. So a lot of what we're using in this forecast is going to be using this, as well as the warmer temperatures in the east, but also the precipitation outlook. We're using our GFS ensemble again, and I think that this gives a really good perspective as to what we're expecting. Lots of precipitation in the west, like we mentioned, those storms bombarding this area, lots of snowfall, lots of precipitation overall. And also the southeast, we see a lot of storms rising through this area. Also, we will see that oftentimes we see storms working their way across the deep south like this. And even sometimes we'll have a whole frontal boundary working its way through the entire area. Overall, I expect a lot of these pockets in here to see above average precipitation as well as out west. I think the main areas that we expect below average precipitation is going to be these areas up here in the colder, drier air mass. I expect just east of the Rockies in the north central states to be the best area to see below average precipitation. Let's move through with this, and we see a lot of the same. We see the things out west dry out, but look at what happens over time. I mean, we see something like this by the time we're taking a look at nearly the midpoint of the month. We see above average precipitation for the northwest here, above average precipitation along that eastern seaboard as well. We see things drying for the central states a little bit here, but only for a slight amount of time. Definitely, most times we're seeing above average precipitation across the deeper south, and we see it kind of regain that above average precipitation here by the midpoint. So we definitely expect a lot of storms rising through this area as well, and also, again, the Cascades, Sierra Nevada, and the Rockies here, as we've been looking at for weeks now. I don't expect that to really end anytime soon. Now, as we move into the extended range, I mean, the temperature pattern really likes to stay the same for a while there, and as we approach the very end of March, we do get a little bit of warmth trending in out west, so warmer temperatures for the very end of March. This is like the final 7 days, and also some cooler temperatures perhaps trending in here for the southeast. But if we see 3 weeks of colder temperatures out west and 3 weeks of warmer temperatures in the east, followed by 1 week that's the opposite, that's not going to be enough to sway the averages in the opposite direction here. Another thing I think is worth mentioning is that we do expect to see overall colder temperatures out here, but we do expect to see them periodically move their way eastward for a day or two at a time. And along those moves, we're going to see cold fronts extending down, and that is where we expect a lot of our precipitation and severe weather to come from. And that's what we've been seeing. That's what we're expecting over the next few days for the beginning of March here. And I do expect that to persist through the month overall. Now, the precipitation pattern in the extended range, as we just keep going, we see it stays very wet along that eastern seaboard and deeper south area. For the final half of March, we do see things drying off a little bit out here, but I don't know if I buy this. These models in the long range through the winter have wanted the trend at warmer temperatures and drier conditions out west, but it's never really taken place. We've seen this keep getting pushed back, but it never really happens. So I expect things to stay relatively wet despite what this model is showing. And also for the deeper south, I expect things to persist. And this model is picking up on that. But I definitely think that this is going to be the case. I expect, again, drier conditions, mostly for the north central states, maybe extending into the upper Midwest overall. So let's go ahead and take a look here at what I'm expecting as far as my March outlook here on my drawn forecast here for you guys. Now, what we expect as far as precipitation is something along these lines. We expect drier conditions again in this kind of northern plains, upper Midwest area. When we see these troughs moving through like this, you do expect to see storms moving down these areas with the jet stream and also up these areas with the jet stream, but you don't really expect them to go straight through the trough. And that's why these areas get missed from a lot of the storms that we end up seeing, and they end up going around with the jet stream. This is a pretty practical reason for why I think for the north central states to the east of the Rockies, again, like I mentioned, so to the east of this area here, we do expect drier conditions. Now, we do expect above average precipitation for a majority of the country here. I think it's worth mentioning that not every single county in here is going to see above average precipitation. I don't think that's a surprise at all. But, you know, when these isolated thunderstorm events happen, and they're going to start up here at some point in March, you know, you could get hit by a storm while the town next to you misses it entirely, or the town next to you can get that storm and you miss it entirely. These things happen a lot, and that's going to create a lot of variables within this. But when we take a look at these whole bigger picture regions, I think this is what we can in general expect. A lot of storms moving through the deeper south and up the coast, like I mentioned. Also, a lot of swinging cold fronts for these areas as well are what I expect. And then out west, I expect these storms to continue to move onshore and bombard this area with heavy precipitation. That's why I gave them the third color. By the way, the lighter green here is where we expect pretty above average precipitation. The kind of medium green here is where we expect a really good chance at above average precipitation. And the darkest green here is where we're almost entirely sure that there will be above average precipitation overall. So confidence is sky high for this area here out west. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the temperature pattern overall. And as we take a look at things, we see that I expect colder temperatures overall, especially in the northwest here, but for a majority of the west here. And I do expect this to actually trend colder and colder for these upper Midwest and Great Lakes areas as well, as I expect kind of an elongated jet stream, something along the lines of this. Again, a lot of these storms moving around the middle of this cool down, so these are the areas that we expect to be dry, but lots of snowfall out west for these mountainous areas. Potential snowfall for the upper Midwest and Great Lakes can't be ruled out, but it's mostly these northern plains and the western half of the kind of upper Midwest that we expect drier conditions. Where we expect above average precipitation is going to be through the deeper south here, like Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, the Gulf states like Mississippi, Alabama, Florida here, and even extending up the southeast into the mid-Atlantic. I expect that we're going to see more and more of these surges of warmth up the east coast here. I expect overall that these have been more west-centered for the central states. I expect that as we move our way into March, they're going to become a little bit more east-centered and straight up the east coast here. I think that it is also worth noting that even though we expect above average temperatures here for the Northeast, you cannot rule out a sudden snowstorm. It doesn't have to be a cold month to see snow, it just needs to be a cold day. And I think that those cannot be ruled out really for anywhere here in the North. So definitely expect the unexpected there. Hope for the best, of course, but you know, we have to be aware that these nasty weather events can definitely happen despite the overall month-long pattern. That doesn't mean there's not going to be cold days in there. certainly cold enough for snow in some cases. And if a storm lines up perfectly with that colder air, I could foresee that for sure bringing potential snowfall. So these types of things do happen in March, although we expect a warmer March. You can't rule it out absolutely. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe for more daily weather videos just like this one. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.